All right, so I think we're going to get started. It is 8 o'clock, and a lot of you guys that live on the East Coast, I don't want to keep you up all night. I don't want to be up all night. I got wings outside that I need to get to, but I'm going to spend a lot of time with you guys. We're going to go over a lot of great information. So first off, let's make sure that everybody can see my screen in just a second here. Can you guys see that screen? Yes or no? Just put it up on the chat. Perfect. Thank you guys so much for telling me that. Let's see if we can get the presenter's view. No, you guys probably see it, but I can't see anything else. So we're going to go ahead and just do it this way. All right, so this webinar that you guys have been waiting for several weeks is called Mastering the Chatterbait. You know, I am a Chatterbait fanatic. I've been using Chatterbaits for a long time and really use them everywhere I go. So this is a webinar that I'm really excited about talking about. This is presented by Lucky Tackle Box. All right, we got some Lucky Tackle Boxes that we're going to be giving away tonight. And it's also presented by Navionics. And kind of a sleeper presenting sponsor is Z-Man, of course. And it's hosted by yours truly, Miles Burghoff, aka Sonar. And a little introduction to myself. Again, my name is Miles Burghoff. A lot of people know me as Sonar. That's my nickname. I'm a Bassmaster Opens angler. Fishing the Eastern Opens this year and also fishing a bunch of BFLs and whatever comes my way. And so tournament fishing is absolutely my #1 passion. That's what I've been doing for a long time. Love it. I'm just digging life. And I'm also co-host of a show called Sweetwater. It's on NBC Sports, Sportsman's Channel, and on Sun Sports down in Florida, as well as Waypoint TV, which is an online streaming platform, really good platform that we've got Sweetwater on. A lot of you guys have probably seen Sweetwater, and if you have seen Sweetwater, you know how much of a fanatic I am about the chatterbait. Whenever I pick up that chatterbait, the co-host Joey knows I'm going to catch fish on it. So so it's just a lot of fun. So the show is a good deal. That's one of the fun things that I do, and I also am a fishing guide. Among other things, I guide both in Alaska during the summer times for a very short period of time, as well as here on Chickamauga. I just recently moved to Tennessee, Chattanooga area back in September. So I've started to guide out here. So if you want to go on a guide trip, learn some more fine-tune chatterbait techniques and other stuff, give me a shout. All right, we got the plugs out of the way. All right, so this is called Mastering the Chatterbaits. We're going to be going through many different layers of this topic. We're going to go into the intro of the chatterbait, kind of talk about what the chatterbait is and why it's so effective. Fishing the chatterbait, why, when, where, and how. And then we're going to get into getting dialed. We're going to be talking about some very specific things about some very specific chatterbait models. So different chatterbaits that are out there. We're going to get into the ones or what each one is really good at, and then we're going to get into the tools of the trade, and then of course Q&A. Which again, you guys, if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. If it's pertaining to the slide that is up on the screen at that moment, please use the Q&A and ask me a question. If I'm not covering it on that slide, I'd be happy to answer it. And you'll see me that I'm going to go ahead and be answering a bunch of questions, kind of going on the Q&A, pausing for a second. But if it's not on that particular slide, just wait until the end of the Q&A section. We're going to get to it. So these questions right now, thank you guys for asking, but I'm actually going to go ahead and clear this out because those are all things I'm going to be talking about in a little bit. All right. Let me make sure we got chat going all right. Perfect. All right, so first section, meet the chatterbait. We got the chatterbait right here. It's a amazing hybrid bait. The chatterbait is really so effective and one of my favorite techniques because it has so many different qualities that some of the most effective techniques out there have. It's got the profile of a jig. You know, if I take this baby out of the package, it looks like a jig, but it has some extra hardware on it that makes it different. You know, it's got the blade on it. So it's got the profile of a jig. It's got the skirt. It's got the vibration of a crankbait, if not more than a crankbait. Most crankbaits do not produce the vibration that a chatterbait does. And it's got the flash of a spinnerbait, depending on the kind of blade combination you have and what kind of skirt you're using and that sort of thing. So it's got a lot of different qualities that make it very good. And because it's got a lot of different qualities from a lot of those different baits, it actually works in a lot of different situations. But one of the things that it's really, really, really good at is it's an excellent grass bait. It's really good for submergent vegetation, you know, hydrilla, milfoil, and things of that sort. We're going to be talking a lot about, using it in the grass. So that's going to be a common theme. It's got huge vibration. Nobody's got better vibration than chatterbait. So that is one of the things when the chatterbait first came out that people just automatically realized is that this bait just has a tremendous amount of vibration. And it sends off some major sound waves and vibrations into the water. And it really, really is different than anything else out there on the market because of that reason. Another thing that the chatterbait is really good at is it's a perfect imitation for both bait fish and crawfish. You know, we've already got some questions that I had to kind of hold off on for the moment using it as a crawfish imitation. Absolutely. It's great for using as a crawfish imitation, but primarily, you know, the majority of the time people think of a chatterbait as a really good imitation for fishing for around shad eating fish or blueback herring or bluegill. Bluegill is a perfect example of a bait fish that this imitates very well. And then unbelievable versatility. Chatterbait is very versatile. Because you can control the depth zone, you can control the color patterns that you have, the action that you impart. There's a lot that you can do with this. You know, there's a lot of baits. You know, a crankbait. There's only so much you can do with a crankbait. There's only so deep that you can get with a crankbait. Okay, but with a chatterbait, I mean, you can let it sink to 100 feet if you wanted to. You can work it at like a jig and do things that you can't do with a crankbait or say a spinnerbait or something like that. All right, so fishing the chatterbait. Why do you want to fish the chatterbait? Why is the chatterbait my favorite go-to bait under the majority of the circumstances that I'm presented with? Number one, it's an excellent search bait. That is one of the main things that I love about a chatterbait, and a lot of different baits out there. You know, there's a lot of baits that are very good search baits. But the great thing about a chatterbait is because it's so versatile, you don't have to pick up another bait to experiment with a different depth zone on the fly. You know, so it's an excellent search bait. It can be used in all different depth zones and around different types of cover. You know, there's not a whole lot of baits out there that can really fish submergent vegetation more efficiently than a chatterbait. There's a couple, but the chatterbait, I think, does it better than all of them. And another reason, you know, that the chatterbait is one of my favorites is because it catches bigger than average fish. This bait is absolutely just amazing at catching, you know, those 3 pound plus fish. And I can't tell you the exact reason. I think it's a combination of just having extra vibration, sending off a bigger sound profile and vibration profile in the water, and imitating the right type of bait fish, but it catches a lot of bigger fish. And another thing is that it's got a great hookup to landing percentage. One of the things that another bait that I really like to use in a lot of the same circumstances that I use a chatterbait is a lipless crankbait. But a lipless crankbait tends to lose a lot more fish. They don't get, once they're hooked up, they can shake that bait. They've got a lot more leverage because you've got those treble hooks that don't tend to stick on the bait or on the fish quite as well. But with the chatterbait, you got a single strong, sharp hook if you keep it sharp and it's not damaged. And that thing, once hooked, the majority of the time you're not losing a fish unless it tears through their skin, if it's just hooked on the corner of their mouth or something like that. But generally, they're not going to spit this bait. They don't have a whole lot of leverage. Another thing that you want to keep in mind, and the reason why I like chatterbait is, again, you can mix and match colors. You can change the color of your trailer. You can change skirts, the blade color, and we're going to be getting into all of that. So it's very versatile as far as matching the hatch. All right, let me just make sure we've got no questions. Check chat. Right on. You guys are awesome. Oh, all right. So fishing the chatterbait. When do you use the chatterbait? First off, it's a year-round presentation. I'm not just saying that. I use the chatterbait every single month of the year. Always got one tied on. You know, some type of variation of the chatterbait. However, just like any technique, I'm not saying that the chatterbait is a cure-all by any means. I won't say that about any bait. I'm going to just tell you straight up that the chatterbait works best in certain circumstances. And those circumstances are when those fish are around shallow cover, okay? So during the spring and the fall, when those fish are going up to spawn, or they're following the bait fish into those shallow creeks and pockets, those are the times that the chatterbait's going to work best. That 0 to 5 foot range, when those fish are in that key zone, it's you're looking at some success. But during the summer and the winter, it's also good to fish a chatterbait, especially when you're talking about fishing places like, if you live in Louisiana, for instance, you throw a chatterbait all year round, and it's always going to be effective because those fish are always in that 0 to 5 foot zone. If you're in Florida, same thing. Generally in the South, if you live on a lake that has a lot of vegetation, it's a real shallow fishery, and there's always fish up shallow, it's going to work all year round. And it'll still work all year round on, you know, even highland reservoirs too. You just got to go find those fish that are more residential and they live up shallow year round. But the high percentage times, spring and fall. You also want to fish it anytime you've got submergent grass. Okay. Again, you know, submergent grass is huge. Anytime you've got non-topped out hydrilla, milfoil, coontail, eelgrass is a really good one. Anytime you've got that, a chatterbait is a great choice if it's in that correct depth zone. And again, anytime the water is stained or muddy, chatterbait really excels. That's when I'm focusing on a chatterbait. Whenever I see stained or muddy water, I pick up a chatterbait for sure. At least going to give it a shot. And yeah, so we've got some Q&As again. Yeah, I'm going to be talking about the gear ratio of the reel, and the rod, the line, all that stuff. We've got a slide just for that. We're going to be, as far as depths, spring, that's actually a good question for right now. I think we can absolutely. So Nelson asks, fishing depths. What kind of fishing depths am I looking at? Like, as far as spring, do I fish shallower, fall, a little bit deeper? Okay, so this really depends on the fishery and the conditions. Like any type of fishing, it's all about the current conditions, what's going on right now. But during spring and the fall, what you've got is a tremendous amount of fish up shallow. In the spring, those fish, their main motivation is to get up there and spawn, you know, look for those spawning areas, while, you know, some fish are feeding and just kind of stocking up before that a major wave. And but you've got fish up shallow, so I'm always looking for fish, and, you know, anywhere from the 0 to, you know, 8 foot. You know, that's always a really good bet during the spring if you've got any water that's anywhere near 60 degrees, or even, you know, anywhere from 55 to 65 degrees. you can fish shallow. You just got to find a little bit stained water if you want to fish for those largemouth or fish a little bit shallower, depending on the lake. And in the fall, you got the same thing. Those, as soon as you start getting those cooler nights and cooler fall rains, that's when those shad are going to just hightail it to the backs of those creeks. I had a tremendous time this year fishing Lake Chickamauga in the fall with a chatterbait, because those fish were just so ganged up back there, and they were in literally, I mean, just enough water to cover their backs. I'm not even kidding. So yes, spring and the fall, we're talking shallow. You can fish very, very shallow as long as you have lower water clarity. That's a big key. And as far as Randall's question, our lakes are clear where you can see 2 to 3 feet down. How would you fish this? I'm going to talk about that in the how in just a minute here. All right, but thanks for the question. All right, so fishing the chatterbait where, again, grass. I mean, I couldn't, most of these slides are going to say grass. Sparse hydrilla, coontail, milfoil, eelgrass, pad fields even. You're running a little bit of a problem with snagging with some of these baits, but I've got a couple baits that I'm going to tell you about that really you won't have any problem fishing pad fields or reed lines or anything like that that has a harder base to it. Fishing docks. Chatterbait is a great dock fishing bait because it skips like a jig, but you're getting to fish that don't generally get have reaction, see reaction baits down there. You know, a lot of people will throw a swim jig underneath there, but you know, something that really provokes a pretty severe reaction strike, they don't see that a lot. So it's an excellent skipping presentation. It can be problematic around wood cover. If anybody's fished a chatterbait, most of the chatterbait designs out there around stumps or wood or anything like that, they snag like crazy most of the time. They're not very good at coming through that, but I've got a few chatterbait choices that really, really do a great job around wood or any type of cover. And so we're going to go over that. Those are the ones that I reach for. The shallow grass flats. Again, shallow grass flats, this is a really good presentation for that. You know, I was just down in Florida fishing the Bassmaster Open, and one of the things that I was doing, that I always do when I get down to Florida, is I was using search baits on these large grass flats, and a chatterbait, as soon as I got out of that emergent vegetation like the Kissimmee grass and the maiden cane and the pads, that's when I started throwing around the chatterbait and searching, you know, around that submergent vegetation. And you can cover a lot of water. You're not getting snagged. You're not getting bogged down that much. And you can catch a lot of fish and find out those little secret sweet spots that you're looking for. Shallow ledges. All right. So I live on Lake Chickamauga, live real close to Lake Chickamauga right now. And so we've got on the Tennessee River, there are several lakes that have really good shallow ledges with grass on them. And Chickamauga is one of them. Even though the ledges haven't been great for this year, as far as the shallow grass, there's still a lot out there. Don't get me wrong. But historically, from what I understand, there's a lot more grass. But shallow ledge, you know, those 3, 4, 5 foot ledges with grass on them, really good presentation for that. And it's even really good for those deep ledges. Even if it doesn't have any grass, you're talking about a current situation where you're fishing for fish that you traditionally throw a deep diving crankbait or a heavy football jig or even a Carolina rig or a spoon. A chatterbait can be a really good option. It's a different presentation. It's got a different look to it. And you can get some really good strikes out of that and catch some fish that have seen other baits. So, and muddy lakes, you know, in lakes with a heavy stain or a recent rain, you know, right now in the South, we've got a lot of rain, and all these lakes here in Tennessee, I can guarantee they're going to eat a chatterbait. I'm going up to fish a BFL next weekend up in northern Tennessee, and I'm going to have a chatterbait tied on. I'm not sure if that'll be the thing that I catch them on, but it's really good bet that I'm going to catch some fish on a chatterbait. because anytime you've got that stained water, 1 foot or less of visibility, chatterbait really shines. Of course, we've talked about it before. 0 to 5 foot zone seems to be the key zone if you're talking about traditional chatterbait fishing. But again, you can fish it a lot deeper. And really, I just want to emphasize any fishery, you just adjust the area and the conditions to this bait. If you want to catch a chatterbait fish, you're not going to do it on the main lake on Smith. You're going to have to go up the creeks and get into that dingier water, fish for those largemouth bass. Okay, so anytime you're trying to get away from the crowds on a main lake and go into the backs of these creeks, chatterbait's a really good option. All right, we got a bunch of questions. Let me see. So, all right, so John asked, do you fish it around laydowns and rock? Absolutely. I fish it around more laydowns than I do rock. Okay, the thing about rock is I prefer to use a crankbait of some sort around rock cover. Okay, and the reason for that is because a crankbait really wants to dig into that type of cover or structure, and it seems to be a whole lot more effective than a chatterbait is. And I'm not saying all the time. Sometimes the chatterbait really does a really good job, especially when you have extremely muddy conditions on, say a riprap bank or something like that. But generally, a crankbait tends to work better around rock. But laydowns, absolutely 100%. And we're going to be using some of the weedless versions of the chatterbait that I'm going to be talking about in a little bit. So good question. Kirk asks, does it work in clear, rocky lakes out west? In fact, I lived out west. I lived in a place called Paradise, California, which is near Chico, California, Northern California. Big, deep spotted bass lakes, Lake Orville, Shasta, all those lakes. And I fish a chatterbait in those lakes too. Primarily, I'm fishing it when I go into the creeks and I'm trying to catch a kicker largemouth. However, on the main lake, you can still fish it. You just need to adjust the presentation a little bit. And we're going to be getting into detail as far as the type of chatterbaits that I use for more open water situations, deeper situations, and suspended fish. We're going to be getting into that a little bit more, but good question. And we're going to talk about weights. So as far as Rob asks, any advice for use in northern states? Absolutely. I actually also lived in Connecticut, which is a really good example. And we've got Lake Champlain coming up for the opens, and I've been to Champlain before, and I used a chatterbait. Again, a chatterbait is really good in submergent vegetation, which you tend to have a lot of in northern lakes. And I tend to, anytime that I've got that submergent vegetation, which generally northern lakes tends to be like, you see more milfoil or pond cabbage, that cabbage that they've got up there. And what I'll do is I'll use a much more natural presentation, more subtle presentation. I'm not going to be using the whites or something that's real bright, because most of the time in northern lakes, you're talking about clearer water. So I'm using really natural presentations and something that looks more like the predominant forage, like perch or bluegill, rock bass, something like that. But we are going to definitely get into that and catch a lot of pickerel up there on these things too. And all the other questions we got up there right now, we're gonna get into those pretty soon. All right, so this is just some screenshots. Of course, this is presented by Navionics, and I have to throw some screenshots up there. I mean, Navionics is one of the things that I cannot live without when I'm fishing out there. But here's some good examples. We've got a screenshot right here of just some docks. One of the good things about Navionics is because they have the docks on there. other than just the contours and the other information they got, that you can see where the docks are. And this is actually a stretch of docks I fished out here on Chickamauga. And here is a good example, right, of a great shallow ledge. This is when it's at summer pool, this is about 5 foot deep or 4 foot deep, 3 to 4 foot deep on top. And there was a lot of grass there this last year. Caught a ton of fish there. I mean, you guys, if you fish Chickamauga, you know where it's at. Real easy to find. Here's another one. This is just a shallow backwater area. When I'm looking for a shallow backwater area where I'm trying to find fish, especially during the fall, I'm looking for these areas that have incoming creeks. Okay, fresh incoming water. That's where these shad tend to focus on the most. So you can easily see that with a Navionics map, where the creek isn't it's not a pocket. It just doesn't end. It's actually got incoming fresh water, especially after rain. And then this down here, just a really good picture of a place that I love to fish when I go down there, Louisiana. This is the Chaffalaya Basin. You can see Bayou Black down there. Oh, the fishing down there on a chatterbait is unbelievable. All right. Fishing the chatterbait, this is how what a lot of you guys want to know. Again, it's virtually impossible to fish wrong. I say that, but then, I'll take somebody fishing and maybe they're fishing it not quite correctly, but it really depends on the situation. Okay. On any given day, you can fish a chatterbait any way you want, but the majority of the time they want it a very specific way, depending on the conditions. 90% of the fishing that I do with a chatterbait is just a straight retrieve with some kind of imparted erratic action. So I'm casting it out there. I'm reeling it, whether it's slow or fast, depending on the situation. And then I'm just either jerking. The first one is a stop and go. So I'm just stopping the reel handle and then going again, stop, go. And then the other one is a popping technique where you just pop the rod tip real quick. You're creating a real erratic action, creating that hunting action from the chatterbait. It seems that fish like one or the other. Now, one of the common themes that I see throughout the seasons is during the spring and the summertime. That's when they like to see it popped. It's a more erratic popping action. It moves, more erratically. And then during the colder months, or I should say, I was wrong. I said that backwards. During the summer and the fall, I like to do that. But during the spring and the wintertime, that's when I like to go to a stop and go. Something a little bit more subtle. Fish are a little bit more sluggish during the early spring and winter months. So usually they want that stop and go retrieve. So sorry I said that wrong. All right. And then another way that is less popular, not as many people do it, but it's extremely effective, especially on lakes like Chickamauga here, is a stroking or worming technique. And what I mean by stroking, if you guys have ever heard of that term, it's usually in reference to fishing a football jig. A heavy football jig on ledges, you're just popping that bait off the bottom and let it flutter back down really hard. It's a really aggressive technique. And the same thing you can do with the chatterbait. Generally, I'm not doing it real hard like that. Generally, I'm just slightly lifting it up, reeling in the slack, just enough to feel the blades vibrate a little bit and letting it go back down, fishing it like a worm or some type of jig. And that is something that I did a lot of damage with during the winter time when the grass was dying down. I was trying to imitate crawfish more than shad. That's a great way to catch those fish in those situations, and that's the way to imitate crawfish. So, all right. So I got a question from John here. He asks, all the pictures are largemouth bass. Does this work with smallmouth bass? Absolutely. However, the trick is finding fisheries that have smallmouth bass that are fishing relatively shallow a lot of the times, but not all the time. I mean, when I go up to Champlain, I'm going to have a chatterbait tied on that has a very heavy, it is heavily weighted. There's a chatterbait that is up to an ounce, and I'm going to have that, and I can get to that 15-foot depth zone and fish that really, really fast while still keeping it down there, 10 to 15 feet. Smallmouth are just real voracious feeders. They eat anything that as long as it really, that you get it in front of them, if they're hungry, they're going to eat it. So it does absolutely work with smallmouth. And anytime you've got a fishery that has a little bit more stain to it, and it still has smallmouth that live in that stained water, generally they're going to live a little bit shallower because fish in stained water live shallower. And so it still works with them. But that's a really good question. I've caught a lot of fish on a smallmouth on a chatterbait, not nearly as much as spots or largemouth though. All right, and the rest of the questions we're gonna answer in a little bit here. All right, so let's talk about getting dialed and know your chatterbaits. Okay, the one thing I want to say is that, of course, I work with Z-Man. They're the original producer of the chatterbait. They make a wide variety of different chatterbaits, and that's the company that I go with. There's no other chatterbait that I need other than what's in their product line. So I don't want you to think this is an infomercial. This is just what I use, just honestly. And there's really 5 different models that I use on a regular basis. You've got the jackhammer chatterbait. You've got the Elite chatterbait, Project Z, the Project Z Weedless, and then the Diesel chatterbait. And we're going to talk about each one in turn. But before we do that, let me. All right. We got people using the chat. I love it. You know what? Actually, before we get started on this, all right, we're going to do a real quick giveaway. We're going to do a lucky tackle box to start out with. I was thinking about how to do a giveaway, but the only thing I could come up with is to pick a number. So you guys are going to guess a number. Don't do it quite yet, but do not use the Q&A. Use the chat, and it's going to be the very first person that gets that number. If we don't, we're just going to have to do it again. So I've got a number already written down. It's between 1 and 40. Go. Whew. You guys are fast. Holy cow. I got to go to the top. There. Oh. I saw it. Where'd it go? Oh, I saw it just now. 228. Yeah. How did that? All right, you guys are going to have to just wait for 1 second here. Totally saw it. There we go. Chris Abram, you got it. 39. I almost showed you the sheet that had the other numbers on it too. So, but it's 39. Chris Abram. If you can write in chat here what your email is, or you can just email it to me at sonar@sonarfishing.com. That would be great. So sonar@sonarfishing.com. Send me an email, but I'm going to write down your name. All right. Congrats. You get a lucky tackle box. I don't know what's in this one, but it's got to have some good stuff. I actually had a couple that I opened and pretty good stuff. Awesome. Thank you for that. Let me write that down. And then we'll continue. Perfect. All right, let's get to it. All right, so the 5 different chatterbaits that I use 6. I use the original chatterbait that I'm not mentioning here. That one's still a really good one. But the jackhammer chatterbait, the number one thing about the jackhammer is that it's an expensive bait. You know, it's up there in price. But it's got the best components and it's got a great overall action. It's actually got a really, really good action that people are really recognizing that it's worth the money. Absolutely. The one thing that this bait does really well that some of the other ones don't do is that it seeks or hunts, depending on how you like to say it. It kind of, it'll run true, it'll run straight, but every once in a while, you know, as it's kind of vibrating, it'll kind of hop to one side and back and forth. So it has a really good seeking action, which it depends on the chatterbait. Some of them don't have as much and some of them really do. And it also depends on the trailer that you're using and things like that. But really good action on the jackhammer. Excellent color selection. It's got a tied skirt. They've got some crazy, beautiful color choices that you got. It's got a good, moderately heavy thump. And so that's one of the main things that I really focus on when I'm selecting a chatterbait is what type of thump does it have? What kind of feel does it have through the rod tip? And this one has a moderately heavy thump, really good action. And this one, another thing that I really look for when it comes to different chatterbaits is whether or not it pulls to the surface. If it pulls to the surface, generally I'm going to be fishing a bait, that bait in shallower water situations. But this one right here, this one is really good for a lot of different situations because I can control the depth better. It wants to dig down a little bit more. It doesn't want to pull to the surface. So I can fish this bait faster while still maintaining, you know, a good depth, depending on, you know, what depth zone I'm trying to fish. And my favorite sizes are 3/8 ounce and 1/2 ounce. 1/2 ounce is my favorite for pretty much the majority of the chatterbaits that I fish because I like to be able to control the depth zone a little bit better. With a 1/2 ounce, you can raise your rod tip a little bit more to keep it up in the water column, or you can lower it to get it deeper. With a 3/8 ounce, you're a little bit more limited unless you're fishing that bait really slow. But jackhammer, very legit bait, something that they've come out with recently in the last year that works outstanding. The next one is the Elite chatterbait. This one's kind of an old standby. It's really close to the design of the original chatterbait. This is the Elite right here. Got a ton of different color selections out there. It's got great components. One of the things that they changed was they changed the clip on the front from a regular clip to this kind of twisty clip that's really high, heavy duty. You know, you're not gonna have a problem with that bending on a giant fish. So that one's really good. The one thing that this clip does though is it kind of reduces the amount of seeking action that you see from this bait. So it tends to track straight. It does dig a little bit deeper. It has a very similar action to a jackhammer in that respect. This bait right here is my favorite choice around sparse cover. Okay, it's not my favorite for fishing in thick grass. It's really good for that 3 to 6 foot depth zone and fishing sparse grass or sparse cover, skipping underneath docks and stuff like that. My favorite size, again, is a 1/2 ounce with that one. So Nick asks about the Z-Man Freedom chatterbait. Okay, so that's another one. And I actually, when I put this thing together, because I don't use it nearly as much as the other chatterbaits, but that one is actually another really good a choice. These are just the ones that generally I fish. There's a 6 one. and that one's the Chatterbait Freedom. And that one actually has a really cool design. It's got a swing head design to it that you can use a extra wide gap hook. Really any hook you want. They come with a really good hook that has a long neck to the eye, and you can use a bigger bait. And that one's actually one of my favorites for fishing for muskie around here, and for when I want a bigger profile bait. That one's a really cool one. Let's actually go online and check that one out real quick. I even got the Chatterbait website up here. So I apologize to you guys for not having me put that one on. So we got the Chatterbait Freedom here. So this is the one right here. This one is and we're going to be talking about the Project Z Weedless, but this one right here, the Chatterbait Freedom, this one has that extra wide gap hook. You can Texas rig the bait, so it makes it extremely weedless. And you've got the swing head, so it's got a really natural erratic design, erratic action to it. And so this one's a really good presentation. And when I'm using this bait, this is when I'm fishing the shallowest water with a lot of grass or stumps. And so this one's a really good one too. So I apologize for not putting this on the slideshow. I was going through it pretty quick, but this one right here is one that I absolutely have to mention. If you want, because you have that extra wide gap hook, I'm using a trailer like a Z-Man Grass Kickers. That one's a really good one. And it creates a bigger profile bait. So out of all the different chatterbaits that Z-Man makes, and all of them out there, this one right here, if you're looking for a bigger profile bait, that one's a really good one. And during times where I'm fishing for muskie, really, really good bait for you northern guys. So what else we got? Mark, absolutely. You can fish any of these for walleye. 100%. I would assume so. I'm not a walleye guy. I'm sorry. But absolutely, you can. I've caught fish on or walleye on this bait before. All right. So the rest of these, I'm going to wait till the end. But thank you for the questions. Let's go back. All right, so we ended with the Elite. Let's go into the next version, the Project Z. The Project Z is a fairly new design. It's got really good components, great hook, real strong hook, great bait keeper, and just overall a really good chatterbait. But it's my absolute favorite for fishing around sparse grass. It clears itself, and what I mean clears itself is it vibrates so well. It has a very distinct thump to it and vibration that the blade on that bait will kick that grass off of it very easy. So it frees itself very well. It's got a heavy thumping action. It's not a seeking bait. It tracks completely straight. You're going to have to impart the action to this bait to be able to create an erratic action to it, but that's okay because I'm fishing in this bait in shallower water, thicker grass cover. And another thing about this bait, and the reason why it's really good in situations like I was down in Louisiana, I was fishing the Atchafalaya Basin for a Bassmaster Open, made a check down there because of this bait. I was fishing a shoal that had literally only about 1.5 feet of water, and it was matted out with grass, but it had these little open pockets, and I was casting the Project Z into those little pockets, and it wouldn't snag very easy at all. It came through it very well, but it wanted to stay up in that water column. I was using a 3/8 ounce, and it wouldn't want to dig into that grass, which wasn't what I wanted. It would want to come up to the surface. So it's a really good bait. And you can actually use it as a wake bait pretty easily too. So great grass fishing bait, best for that 0 to 3 foot zone. But this bait also comes in like 3/4 and 1 ounce versions too, which this is the only one that does that. So you can use it in real deep water in those circumstances. All right, the Project Z Weedless. This is one that I started using side by side with the Chatterbait Freedom. Again, sorry, I forgot to put that one on there. I use this one quite a bit. It's very similar to Project Z. It's called the Project Z Weedless, but it has a brush card, as you can see. And at first look, you kind of look at it, you're like, oh well, you know, it has a brush guard. It obviously probably goes through cover a little bit better, but maybe not that much. But I'm telling you, this Chatterbait comes through stuff way better than you would imagine. It is crazy how much grass it'll go through. It is the absolute best Chatterbait for going through anything that has that is hard, you know, whether it's wood, brush, pad stems, reeds underneath, you know, docks, fish and dock pilings. This bait will go through it absolutely great. And the reason that I would choose this over the Freedom for fishing around docks is just because this one wants to go a little bit deeper. The Freedom, you know, is really good for fishing a little bit shallower. Generally, you know, I'm fishing in that 2-foot zone quite a bit, but this one I can slow it down a little bit and get it a little bit deeper. Not saying that you can't do that with the Freedom, but the Freedom tends to be a little bit bulkier with the bait that you're using, depending on what that is. So both of them are really good options for fishing weedlessly. All right. So the diesel chatterbait is the last one. This one right here was actually designed as a saltwater bait. It's got a crazy heavy wire hook on it. It's got no skirt. We actually had a question about having no skirts on there. This one has no skirt. It just has a Diesel Minnows trailer, which is actually my favorite trailer for all chatterbaits. And so the great thing about this bait is it is a crazy seeking bait. It moves side to side very erratically all over the place, but always finds its center and goes straight. And so that one creates a very erratic action. You don't have to impart any action to it. In fact, I prefer not to, because sometimes it wants to catch itself and kind of get tangled. But overall, it's got a great action to it. It's got a low profile, so those guys that are fishing clear water or where those fish really want something that's a little bit more subtle, doesn't have that skirt or the bulkiness to it, feeding on smaller bait fish, this is a really good one. It's an excellent bass lure, even though I catch redfish. If you watch Sweetwater and you've seen us go down to Louisiana, I always tie on a diesel chatterbait and crush a big bull red. So really good bait for a lot of different situations. And it's good for clear water. For you northern guys and you guys fishing for smallmouth, this is the one that I would absolutely get. They come in a lot of different colors. The color schemes are kind of weird on them. They're made for saltwater. But they do have some that have like a chartreuse head, or I think there's one that's a white head. But I wouldn't get too hung up in it. You know, for smallmouth, those fish love crazy colors, chartreuse and things like that. So get a chartreuse head or a white head, or even this black head's fine, and you'll catch a bunch of fish with that. So let's talk a little bit about blades. Blades color. Blade color is a really big deal for me. Silver for clear water and calm sunny conditions is when I like to use silver. When I'm presented with moderately sunny conditions and stained water, maybe I've got, you know, partially cloudy conditions. Every once in a while the clouds are kind of hiding the sun. That's when I go to a gold. And then when I really want to imitate bluegill that have, you know, less shine to them than a shad, that's when I go to black or green pumpkin colored. Or for, you know, when I'm presented with really muddy water, when I'm not going to get a lot of shine at all, and really overcast conditions, again, where I'm not going to get a lot of shine, that's where black and green pumpkin really does well. And just for the sake of keeping things really simple, 4 colors are going to cover all of your situations that you're presented with. So if you were to go to Bass Pro Shops or you know, pick up some chatterbaits, these are the 4 colors that you absolutely want to have. The first one is green pumpkin. Green pumpkin is excellent for fishing around any type of grass. When you're fishing in heavier grass situations, a lot of times those fish are feeding on shiners, and they're feeding on bluegill and other types of you know, bluegill species, sunfish, and a green pumpkin really imitates those bait fish well, that don't have a lot of shine to them. They don't have that white side, that kind of counter shading that you see on shad or herring or something like that. But when you're presented with a situation where the fish are feeding on shad, maybe it's you know, it's a little bit clear water, that's when I go to a white or some type of translucent color, something that has a little bit of clear skirt on there. And then when you're still fishing for fish that are feeding on a shad or pelagic bait fish, herring, whatever it is, we've got a lake here in Tennessee, has blueback herring, and it's pretty muddy right now. The white and chartreuse is a really good color. The fish can find it a little bit better in that dirtier water. So chartreuse and white's a really good option. And then black and blue is kind of a wild card. That one's, you know, I've seen it situations where those fish absolutely will go for black and blue, but generally I'm fishing the green pumpkin and the black and blue in the same type of conditions. Okay, so they're kind of interchangeable. I always start with the green pumpkin, but before I totally eliminate the green pumpkin or the chatterbait in general, wherever I'm fishing, I go to the black and blue. All right, so let's talk about trailers. All right, so there's a lot of different options that you can do as far as trailers. They're endless. There's so many soft plastics out there. There's so many trailers. And I tell you what, my absolute favorite, and I've experimented with a lot of them. When I first started working with Z-Man, this is the one that really stood out for me, and it's right here on the slideshow. This is the Diesel Minnows swim bait, and this right here is the perfect profile for a chatterbait. If you're trying to imitate some type of bait fish and not a crawfish, this right here is the first one that I reach for. I mean, once you put this baby on a chatterbait, number one, it's the perfect profile. Okay, it's the perfect size. You don't have to trim it down. It has the perfect size to it. It's got the perfect width. Everything's perfect about it. Got a great action to it, but it's also extremely durable. Okay, so once you put this on there, put a little bit of super glue on the base of the hook, and that thing is going to catch a ton of fish. I was just fishing the Bassmaster Open down in Florida, caught a lot more pickerel than I did bass, unfortunately. And literally for 2 days, I fished one chatterbait with one diesel minnow on it, and I literally caught over 30 pickerel, along with the bass that I was catching on it, and never changed the trailer. So it's so durable. You can super glue it on there, and you're good to go for a long time. But if you're in a situation where maybe you want to imitate a crawfish, you know, go to a crawfish imitation just like you would on any type of jig. You know, that's you know, the sky's the limit. You can do whatever you want. But whenever I'm trying to fish it more like a jig through dying grass, you know, when the water's colder and those fish are focused more on jigs, that's when I go to a regular jig trailer. This is the Bat Wings from Z-Man. And also, if I'm trying to still, you know, be a little bit more subtle, have a trailer that doesn't have a whole lot of action, I go to some type of soft plastic jerkbait. This is the Streaks right here. That's a really good one. And then this one right here, we talked about the Chatterbait Freedom. My favorite trailer for the Chatterbait Freedom is the Grass Kickers. You know, some type of a bigger profile swim bait that's Texas rigged on that Chatterbait Freedom. This is a really good option for that. Adds a lot of action to it. It has a heavy vibration. It bulks up that profile, and just is really good in a lot of different situations. So sky's the limit as far as that goes. All right. Finally, the last slide, and we're going to get into Q&A, so don't worry. I'll be here as long as I need to. Rods. There's several different rods that I reach for. The main one, if I'm fishing grass, if I'm fishing submergent vegetation, and I'm in open water fishing flats or something like that, I reach for a 7.3 medium heavy Fitzgerald versus series rod. That's the one that I use, a casting rod, not a spinning rod. It gives me a lot of leverage. It's a stiffer rod. It's a rod that I also use for worming and fishing jigs and things of that sort. But it's great for being able to rip those baits out of that grass. And I really don't have to worry about having a glass rod, a very soft tip rod when I'm trying to, control those fish in that heavy grass. If I'm fishing real open water, not a whole lot of vegetation, maybe I'm fishing a diesel chatterbait. That's when I go for a medium action, same length, 7.3 rod. Something that I have a lot of leverage to make long casts with. It's got a softer action to it, so I'm not pulling away from those fish when they hit, and I still have good control, but a softer tip on it. And then if I'm fishing around cover, I'm fishing shallow, or I'm skipping underneath docks, I'm casting around real tight quarters around brush and stuff like that. That's when I reach for a 7-foot medium heavy a rod. I like the 7-footer. It's a lot more nimble. Generally, you're going to have a shorter handle on it. It's not going to get caught on your sweatshirt or your shirt. The Fitzgerald Versa Series one is perfect for it because you're able to have a lot of maneuverability. It's got a great backbone to it, but it's also it's just a very accurate rod. So I just change it with the different conditions, but any of those you can use for your all-around chatterbait rod. I can honestly say that. If I was to pick just one, I would go for the 7-foot medium heavy. I think that one is a great all-around a chatterbait rod. Personally, some people like glass rods. I can't argue with somebody like Brett Height. The guy has won a ton of money on chatterbaits. He's probably a better chatterbait fisherman than I am in some ways. But and he likes to have a more at least from what I hear, a softer tip glass rod. But I like a graphite. I like a 7-foot medium heavy, 7-foot or 7.3. The reel that I use, I actually have changed my tone a little bit since I put this up here. I have the Quantum Tour S3 7.3 to 1 gear ratio. You can use whatever brand you want. I use the Quantum Tour because I absolutely love that one. And the new S3 has a bigger spool on it, so that means that I can control the speed of that bait a lot better. I've got a lot more spool capacity on it. It's a bigger spool than traditional, but that's not the only gear ratio that I use. When I was down in Florida, I had to really tone it down, and I went down to a 6.1 to 1 gear ratio because I needed to really slow down that presentation. I needed to slow myself down, make sure that I wasn't reeling it too fast because those fish really wanted it slow rolled. So if you're in a situation where you're covering a lot of water and the fish want it really fast, use 7.3 to 1. That's why I like to use the majority of the time. But if you really have to slow down, a 6.1 to 1 is a really good option. Just kind of adjust it to the situation. But overall, if you were to pick one reel, what I found with the S3 series, whether it's the Quantum Tour or the Quantum Smoke S3, they have larger spools. And what happens when you have a larger spool, if it's filled up to the max, you actually get a lot of inches per turn. Even if it's a lower gear ratio, you're still going to be bringing more line in per turn than, say, a smaller spool that maybe has a higher gear ratio. So even with the 6.1 to 1, I could speed that thing up and catch up with those fish when they hit real fast. So I didn't have a problem. So that 6 to 1 is a pretty legit gear ratio for that too. As far as the line goes, I use 15 to 20 pound test. This is primarily a heavy cover situation or tactic. I say 15 to 20 pound test, but if you're fishing open water, you're trying to get deeper, you live up north, use 12 pound test, but I wouldn't go any lighter than that. The only time that I go down to really 15 pound test for general chatterbait fishing is when I'm trying to get it a little bit deeper. But if I'm not worried about the depth, I'm going to 20-pound test and sometimes even 25-pound test if I'm fishing really, really heavy cover for big fish. And another tool that I use, of course, Navionics Maps. We talked about that earlier. Being able to find docks is really important. That's a really good feature of Navionics. Finding the grass flats and the shell areas, finding those transition and intersection areas. I just can't say enough about mapping technology nowadays, and so it's an absolute must tool. But that right there is the end of the regular presentation. So let's get into the questions that we got here. So I'm going to try to go through these. All right. So Randall asks, our lakes are clear where you can see 2 to 3 feet down. How would you fish this? I think I may have already answered this, but maybe not. The answer is I would fish it 2 to 3 feet isn't a crazy good clarity. It's pretty good clarity, but it's not gin clear. So you can still fish it a lot of different ways. The main thing that I would say is that you need to fish around cover. Whenever you have clear water, you want to get a reaction bite from a fish. You don't want to be fishing in open water and get those fish. Generally, there's a lot of situations where you can catch suspended fish in clear, deep lakes. But generally, if I'm trying to elicit a strike from a fish in water clarity 2 to 3 feet, I'm fishing around the grass, fishing around some type of cover to get a reaction strike. So that's a big key. All right, before we start losing too many people, let's actually do another giveaway. We've got, we're going to do a Z-Man Chatterbait prize package, a bunch of the different baits that we just talked about. So we're going to do the same thing. Do not give me any numbers yet. Don't give me any numbers yet. All right, so same thing, 1 to 40. Choose a number right now. I've already got it written down. Oof. Getting close. Oh, there we go. Alan Summer, 2. The number was 2. Alan Summer. You got it, man. That'll be a good prize package. If you can share your email with me, I actually have it in the list. Did I have it? Oh, shoot. I might have messed up on that one. I did mess on that. So I'm still going to give it to Alan, but everybody that guessed 2 is going to get something. So Alan's going to get the Z-Man prize package. And then Joe is the first one that had 2. I just didn't see it. See how I messed things up? We're going to give Joe Roberts a lucky tackle box. So everybody else is going to get a lucky tackle box. So let me figure out this fiasco I just created. My bad, peeps. All right, so, and then we've got, man. And we're going to get right back to Q&A. All right, so Joe Roberts, you picked 2, so you got lucky tackle box. We've got Kevin Leiden. I stink at these giveaways, but Hey, my loss is your gain. John Gibbons. All right, so all you guys, I'm going to get your information. I actually have all your information already as far as emails. So you guys, yeah, you're going to pick two. All right, I think that is everybody that had two. All right, sorry about that haphazard giveaway, but it worked out in your guys' favor. So you guys are getting lucky tackle boxes. Alan is getting Z-Man. Awesome. So Joe, Kevin, John, lucky tackle boxes. I wish I had enough for everybody, but I don't. All right, let's get back to Q&A. All right. So Nick asks, what weights do I prefer for types of cover? So the two basic weights that I'm going to be generally using for the chatterbait is 3/8 ounce and 1/2 ounce. The 3/8 ounce is for when I'm fishing the shallowest cover, when I'm trying to keep it from digging into that cover real well, real thick. You know, that's the biggest key, is that you want to contact cover. You want to be fishing this around that vegetation, or you know, you want to be able, especially when you're fishing submergent vegetation, but you don't want to dig it into that grass too much. So you want to choose a weight that is going to just barely tick above that grass, but still get a little bit of contact. So it really just depends on the situation and the different types of chatterbaits. Again, Project Z's and some of those chatterbaits, the Chatterbait Freedom, they want to move up. They want to move up in the water column. They want to stay a little bit higher. They have a little bit more drag. So. Josh Lucas asks, is there a reason for different blade designs? And I think you mean as far as like the different brands out there, the different blade designs. Yeah, you know, different brands have different designs. I've experimented with a lot of them before I started working out with Z-Man. But really, before I even went with Z-Man, I kind of went back to theirs, and because they've got a different selection that does different things. But I like the traditional, you know, kind of coffin bill blade design. I think that one's my favorite. RJ asks, if and when do I ever throw a chatterbait without a skirt? Every once in a while, I throw the diesel chatterbait that doesn't have a skirt for the same situations that I talked about, just a little bit more, a different presentation, more subtle. You also get a more erratic action out of a bait that doesn't have a skirt. For some reason, probably just because you have less drag that controls that action a little bit more. You get a little bit more erratic action. So Carol asks, or Dan asks, do I tie directly to the line or swivel? I never use a swivel for a chatterbait. They've got the snap on there. The thing about a snap swivel, like I used to use those when I was a kid and just starting out, and a snap swivel just adds a little bit too much bulk, a little bit too much hardware to that bait. But each chatterbait comes with two different types of designs of snaps, the more heavy duty one, and then the traditional snap that you see on the original chatterbait and the jackhammer chatterbait. And those are what I tie directly to. So Rob asked, speaking of smallmouth, how does it do in the rocks like they have at Mille Lacs? So I haven't been up to Mille Lacs. Really jealous of everybody that has. Can't wait to get up there. Again, the chatterbait isn't my first choice in rocks, but if I'm in a situation where I've tried a lot of different stuff and maybe I want to try something that looks a little bit different, a chatterbait like the Project Z Weedless, fish slow, a yo-yo technique, fishing it like a worm on the bottom in rocks could be extremely effective. So something to keep in mind. All right, Kenny asks, I'm on Grand Lake. It has no grass. It's deep and clear. Feedback on this condition. Not the chatterbait's not going to be my first choice when in this situation. However, there is certain circumstances where I am going to use a chatterbait. Number one, when I go up into the major creek arms that are a little bit more stained. Again, that's a really good situation to throw a chatterbait. Also around docks, even if it's clear around docks, burn that chatterbait by the sides of the floats, floating docks especially. Burn it right against the side of those floating docks really quick, as long as it's below the floats. And I've caught them that way, even in clear water. What size, Randall asked, what size Project Z Weedless for skipping docks? The 3/8 ounce is actually the lighter the bait, moderate weighted baits actually skip a lot better than heavier baits. The heavier baits, you might just hit the water, it catches, and it just sinks. You look like a dummy. Which often happens, but both the 3/8 ounce and the 1/2 ounce you can skip fairly well, but I'd say the 3/8 ounce skips a whole lot better. Bent versus straight blade. I don't use any straight blades. Most of them are bent. That's what I like a little bit more. I feel like it comes through cover a lot better, because with a straight blade, when that's vibrating like that, it just, the bent one kind of has a little slope, a little nose to kind of slide over the cover a little bit better. It doesn't just spear that cover. Alan asks, do I always fish a chatterbait with a trailer? Yes, I always fish a trailer on a chatterbait. I just feel like it does a better job at imitate. I don't know. It's just something I've always done with a chatterbait. What type of John asked what type of trailer I use for skipping. Generally, the majority of the time I'm fishing the diesel chatter, or the diesel minnows. Diesel minnows is my favorite all around. That's a really good one. So that's the one I generally use. But anything that it creates a little bit more bulk, that's not too crazy bulky, that where anytime you can create a little bit more lift while skipping, it's going to make skipping a little bit easier. But that does a great job. Nick asked, would I ever run rattles on the bait? Not generally. It has so much vibration and action to it already that I think that rattles would be redundant, not as effective. I'm not saying that it wouldn't be effective. I just don't think that it would help very much. Do I ever use, Paul asked, do I ever use braid with this? I have used braid. And really, I used to use it every once in a while when I was fishing grass, fishing the original and the elite chatterbait, because I needed a lot less stretch, to be able to clear those baits in that grass and pull it out of that grass. But nowadays with the Project Z, it comes through grass so well that I just use fluorocarbon all the time. Neil asked, do I make modifications to the chatterbaits? That's a really good question. Really, I don't do a whole lot when it comes to the blade. Sometimes, you know, if I have to, I'll change out the snap. You know, if I want a little bit more action out of the bait, I might go to the traditional snap instead of the heavy duty one. But generally, no, I don't change that too much. One thing I will do is especially on the Project Z and some of the other ones, I'll just make sure that the eye that's on the head of the chatterbait, just make sure that that's completely closed down, and so the blade can't fall off. That's one thing that I'll do. And then I always trim the skirt whenever I pull it out of the package. The Elite Chatterbait isn't so bad, but generally I'm going to trim it just a little bit, so you got maybe a quarter to a half inch of skirt material going past the hook. That's generally how I trim it. But beyond that, I really just customize it with the different trailers that I use. Ray asked, would I recommend using a brush hog style bait as a trailer at any point? Sure. If you know, I would say that if you're trying to imitate a crawfish, you know, some type of creature bait like that, you know, the boar hogs that Z-Man makes is a really good one. You know, it's not my first choice, but a lot of guys use it and they swear by it. So absolutely, you can try it. John asks, any problem using a spinning reel? What length rod would I recommend? Any difference in technique than with a casting reel? I generally don't use a spinning rod, but if I'm fishing inshore, I do use a spinning rod a lot because I need that extra line capacity that I have with a size 40 or, you know, 4,000 spinning reel, really a 40 with the quantum smokes that I use. But you can use it if you feel more comfortable with the spinning rod. The only thing is that I like to have heavier line. Helps me, you know, control the depth a little bit better when I'm fishing shallow. But if you're fishing a little bit deeper, you know, 5 to 8 foot, a spinning rod can be really good. Generally, what I'll do is I'll use 20-pound test vicious braid, and then a you know, 4 foot 20-pound fluorocarbon leader. So I would put a big heavy duty fluorocarbon leader on that line. You can use a spinning rod, anything over 7 foot, the 7 foot medium heavy. When I'm out fishing inshore with the diesel chatterbait, I use a 7.2 medium heavy Aqua Dream from Fitzgerald Rods that works really good. Can you skip a Freedom, or does the swing head prevent that? The Chatterbait Freedom isn't the best skipping bait, but it does skip. You just have to use a bulkier trailer on it. But because of that swing head design, it doesn't want to skip nearly as well, but it is doable. You can do it, just like it just takes a little bit of practice. Somebody asked, have I ever fished chatterbait deeper than 20 feet of water? Yes, I've fished it deeper than 20 foot of water. Again, you're traditionally not, you can use like the 3/4 and 1 ounce Project Z's and slow roll it, but generally I'm fishing on the bottom, fishing it more like a hair jig or a football jig, or, you know, a spoon, just trying to get that reaction bite out of a fish down there that's never seen chatterbait that deep. Robin asks, have I used the micro version? Yes, I have used the micro version. Anytime you've got little tiny, teeny tiny bait fish, that micro version works really good if you have a little bit darker water. But I use that on spinning gear, lighter spinning gear. Gene asks, any special technique for large rivers current is a chatterbait just a lake bait? No, chatterbait is a great river bait. Most rivers have lower water clarity. You got a lot of current situations. It's a great presentation of fish around any type of current break. Very similar places where you throw a spinnerbait or a crankbait. It's a great different presentation. And a lot of times you're fishing around all types of cover on the shoreline. So absolutely, the chatterbait's a great bait for all that. When Willie asks, when wouldn't I throw a chatterbait? And the answer to that is there's a lot of times that I won't throw a chatterbait, just like any other bait. It comes down to on the regular. If I'm fishing deeper than 5 foot of water, or if I'm fishing any deeper than 5 foot of water, that's when I start going. The likelihood that I'm fishing a chatterbait is less and less and less. Now, but I always have one to throw out in deeper water just to experiment. But if I'm fishing that 5 foot zone, I'm fishing it. But if I'm not, generally I'm doing something else. So at least trying something else. So this is a really good question from Ray. Why do bass react so well to the chatterbait opposed to a swim jig? And that's not always true. A chatterbait and a swim jig can be interchangeable. Sometimes they want a chatterbait over a swim jig, and sometimes it's the exact opposite. That's a really good question. So if the fish want something that's more subtle, maybe it's a little bit clearer water, they don't want something that has a whole lot of movement to it, the swim jig is an excellent choice. If you need to move something really, really fast, for instance, fishing around docks and trying to get a reaction strike in clear water, like we talked about a little bit earlier, moving it really fast, the swim jig is the best. If you need to move real fast and fish, have something that's a little bit more subdued of an action, a swim jig's great. But a lot of times when the water's dirtier, the fish are more active, they want something that has a lot of vibration, they need to find it a little bit easier, the chatterbait is the deal. So Willie asked, chatterbait has become my confidence bait. How does fishing a rattle trap compare on the grass? Two different types of baits. A rattle trap is definitely not obsolete when it comes to a chatterbait. The lipless crankbaits are still a big deal, and I've got 2 giant boxes full of lipless crankbaits, and I use them all the time. Generally, if I'm fishing a flat that has sparse vegetation, it's got a lot of space, very sparse vegetation. The grass doesn't grow up, but maybe a couple feet off the bottom, and maybe it's a little bit slightly deeper, that 6-8 foot range. That's when I reach for a lipless crankbait. But if that grass is growing up a little bit, maybe there's only a couple feet of water between the surface and where the grass stops, that's when I start using a chatterbait and that sort of thing. So on flat situations, when I'm fishing flats with grass, more sparse grass, that's when I'm fishing the lipless crankbait most of the time. And then thicker grass, shallower water, that's when I'm fishing the chatterbait that does a lot better in the grass. Mike asked, when fishing grass lines, do you tend to rip it through the mats? I don't fish a chatterbait in any matted vegetation really to speak of. I had that one situation down on the Chaffalaya Basin in Louisiana where I fished it quite a bit in thicker grass. But yes, I don't generally fish it in really, really super thick stuff. Just kind of the outside edges, any points, pockets. If I've got a grass line that's matted out on the surface, I'm fishing the edges of it. Mike asked, would I use a chatterbait for night fishing? Absolutely, 100%. It's got a ton of vibration to it. It's perfect for night fishing. I would use that black and blue color that we were using as a wild card and go hog wild with it. All right. Well, we don't have a whole lot of questions since everybody's starting to kind of drop out. Just wanted to say thank you guys for showing up. Those that won prize packages tonight, be sure to, if I don't get a hold of you, it means that I can't find your email. But my email is sonar@sonarfishing.com. So you can reach me there, sonar@sonarfishing.com. And we're gonna do we've still got some Q&A. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate it. Sorry about the giveaway blunder that worked out in everybody's favor. And And be sure to, if you guys are on social media, please, if you like this presentation, I've got more of these. Please join me on social media. I have Instagram. It's under Sonar Fishing. Facebook, Miles Sonar Burghoff. My website, sonarfishing.com. And, of course, the Sweetwater platforms. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and also that Waypoint TV. So thank you guys very much. Give some love to Lucky Tackle Box and Navionics. Thank you guys for presenting this webinar. I hope you guys liked it. So for those of you that need to get to bed, get to bed. Thank you very much. For those of you that have more questions, stick around. All right, Willie asks, do you generally have 3/8 ounce as well as a 1/2 ounce chatterbait tied on my boat? Would they be the same color? In fact, this situation happens a lot. So generally, once I get kind of keyed in on a bite, you know, a certain color pattern, a certain type of blade styles, whatever it is, I'll have two different sizes. I'll have the 3/8 ounce. Even sometimes I have a 1/4 ounce. You know, or I'll use the different sizes. So I can use the 3/8 ounce in shallower water where the grass is growing up a little bit higher. And then I'll use a 1/2 ounce when I'm trying to get that bait a little bit deeper. So really good question. Absolutely. I always try to, once I know that I'm fishing the chatterbait, I'm always trying to adjust the line sizes, and the weights to the depth that I'm trying to fish. Oh, excuse me. I think that's it. I don't think anybody has any more questions. You guys are awesome. We still got 30 people. John asked, this one I can't necessarily read it. I don't understand. I think you're asking, how do you set the hook? Generally, I'm setting to the side and up a little bit. I'm usually got my rod tip down close to the water, okay? And I'm doing a kind of a side hook set, but because it's a single hook that's up, I kind of set the hook to the side and up, so kind of a 45-degree angle. It's not a dead set, you know, that's just how I traditionally do it. All right. Willie asks, do I have any YouTube? Oh, YouTube. If you guys are on YouTube, go to Sonar Fishing, my YouTube channel. I'm trying to put a lot more videos out there, be more helpful. Think I might have some chatterbait videos on there, but that's actually a really good subject. As soon as the chatterbait fishing starts getting really good, I'm going to catch some chatterbait fish and show you guys some cool videos. So even if I don't have some great videos for chatterbait fishing, I've got other great stuff on my YouTube channel, so go check that out. Josh asked, what is a good way to check how deep your bait is running when changing line sizes? Well, I mean, it's really, I'm just estimating based on, you know, the cover that I'm contacting. You know, I'm trying to, you know, if I'm fishing a grass flat that's 5 foot deep and the grass is growing a foot off the bottom, I try to adjust my line size or the speed of my retrieve or the size of the bait until it starts just barely ticking it. You know, so I adjust all that, and that's how I know. But, you know, this isn't an exact science. You can go to you know, a pool or something and test it out to try to figure that out. But, you know, I don't get too complicated with that. Randall asks, when I do a stop and go retrieve, how often do I stop it during a retrieve? I generally, I don't know, every few seconds I'll just be reeling it, stop, let it stop. Sometimes a lot more than normal, and sometimes I'll let it fall to the bottom and then start it up. But most of the time, I'll just stop it for a second, just to it'll be moving along and just kind of pop down and then keep going. All right, guys, I'm going to call it right now. Thank you guys for all your questions and for showing up. If you have any more questions, please feel free to get a hold of me, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, not really Twitter, but or YouTube, or my email, Sonar Fishing. But anyways, I will talk to you guys later. Thank you guys for showing up, and join me for my next webinar. It's going to be coming up in April, I believe. So stay tuned on my social for that. Thank you guys. Have a great Saturday night. I'm out. Thanks, guys.